Welcome to the Idea to Value podcast, where in every episode we highlight the latest insights into creativity and innovation from experts around the world. I'm your host, Nick Skillicorn. I care about the evidence behind what makes ideas happen, and I've already helped thousands of people just like you through my unique insights into recent scientific findings of how creativity works. I also show you how to turbocharge innovation programs so they finally deliver on the value and ideas you've been struggling to execute. Get your free training on how creativity can be improved by registering now at www.ideatovalue.com. Now let's get on with today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Idea to Value podcast. I'm very happy to have Ron Carucci with me today. Ron is the managing partner of Navalent and an expert on the topics of leadership and seeing what makes leaders stand out from one another. Ron, it's wonderful having you here.
Nicholas, great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So for people who don't know about you and Navalent, can you just give us a quick rundown as to what type of work you do and how you got started in it?
Yeah, you bet. So Navalent is a small boutique leadership and organizational consulting firm. We've been around 15 years. I think we're probably the oldest 15-year-old startup. And we spend our days working along large global international brands, mid-cap companies, and then startups who are trying to scale. But whatever the context, these leaders are either in a ditch trying to create some type of transformational change or trying to seize an opportunity before they get in a ditch. But whatever it is, our job is to help them construct a very robust and viable journey to transform something, and that's strategically, organizationally, and then personally as leaders. So we look at the context of their organization, their relationships with their teams, and their individual preparation to lead and guide major change.
Now, leadership is one of these words, sometimes people would say like innovation, that can mean so much to so many different people. What do you actually mean when you talk about leadership?
Leadership, communication, these are all words I wish we could put a moratorium on and sort of make a rule that says for the next 10 years you can't use these words, so that people were forced to be more clear. I think it's a tricky one. I think, people ask me a lot, well, what makes a leader? I'm like, well, if people are following you, that's on one basis. One fundamental basis is if you have anybody that wants to go with you anywhere, you're not leading anybody. It certainly isn't a title or a position. It isn't how much power you have. But I think it's, are you compelling a set of people to discover the best versions of themselves and their own sense of purpose, and helping connect that sense of purpose to a broader agenda that's worth contributing to? And do people want to go? Being a boss doesn't make you a leader. So it is a squishy word, and it's well, you know it when you see it, and you certainly know when you see it badly done. But I do think it doesn't have to be a position. It can be certainly a body of influence, a body of ideas. But it's about impact, right? At the end of the day, it's about having impact.
It's interesting you say that that you know it when you see it, and especially you know it when you see it done badly, because a lot of people assume that people in leadership positions who have got to a decision maker, executive level, whatever it might be, that they're there and therefore they must be good leaders. But that's not always the case. Yeah. I've worked with many people myself who might be senior and might be in leadership positions, but don't necessarily have leadership capabilities.
Oh gosh, Nick, we are cruelly moving along people into positions well beyond their readiness. As I mentioned to you earlier, we did a 10-year longitudinal study to understand why it is that people who are moving into broader positions of leadership, why more than half of them fail in the first 18 months. We studied 2,700 leaders, and then we isolated 100 of those to see almost in slow motion what was causing them. How could they go from being wonderful? We've all heard the words, I'm sure you have too. They're high potential, they're long-term runway, great assets. And then suddenly within 12 or 15 months, they're a disaster. It just made no sense to us. So I think organizations of all kinds are advancing people into roles. Human beings are accelerating their careers well beyond their maturity to arrive in positions of responsibility and expectations that far exceed what they're capable of doing. And then they have to fake it, right? So you have these deep imposter syndrome people walking around terrified that at some point they're going to get found out, grasping at straws, trying to look like they know something they don't. Everybody knows they don't, they don't know. And you have this collusive environment of, of duplicity, of we're all going to pretend that they're in this job and they know what they're doing, but we all know they don't. It's a horrible situation. And boy, talk about killer of innovation.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I love it when people talk about having actually done research on the topic, and a 10-year longitudinal study. That's one of the most effective ways for people who don't know what that is. It's you follow the same people, checking up progress year after year on how they're doing. Could you let us know a little bit about what that study taught you about what differentiates people who succeed in leadership from those that really struggle with it?
Yeah, you bet. Our initial intent, I mean, it was personal for us. Right? We got, people in organizations we were working with were being given broader positions and not doing well. And one CEO called me angry. They had to let this really high potential person go, and more than subtly inferred that some of the responsibility was mine for not having better prepared him, which was painful to hear. And I asked if we could come back in and sniff around to understand how could we so badly misjudged his incredible talents and potential. And that little investigation is what led to our 10-year longitudinal study. And we've known for more than 25 years that more than half of them fail. Of course, recruiters love it because it's an annuity for them, but the carnage of careers. So our goal was to find out what's getting in their way. What are the landmines? What are the things that they're not anticipating, that are coming, making them come into fire and stumble. And there were plenty of those, most of which organizations actually put in their way. It's not like they just, some innate quirk of theirs suddenly appeared. Sometimes it was that. But for the most part, these are obstacles that from the very beginning are, placed in their path. But we were pleasantly surprised to be able to isolate what was it the other half were doing that caused them to stick the landing. That was exciting to find. And we did over 99 regression analyses on this data, because no matter how we cut the data up, sort of morphed the sample, the same patterns would rise up at the top. And I didn't want to have to say, and my research team finally said enough. It's all 4 or nothing, right? So if you had 3 of these 4 patterns in your behavior, you still were in the failure group.
And what are these 4 patterns?
And I didn't want to have to say that, but that's the truth. So the first one is what we call context. These were the leaders who were curious. These were the leaders who could anticipate internally and externally what was coming down the pike from a disruption point of view. They paid attention to their industry trends. They paid attention to competitors. They didn't just simply slap on solutions. They didn't reach back to past successes and sort of rely on an old formula. They asked how they understood that they had as much to adapt in themselves as they had in the environment around them. They were curious and asked questions and were willing to suspend disbelief more so than they were feeling the need to be the answer ATM and just sort of slap on solutions to things. So they were contextually intelligent. The second one was what we call breadth. So as you rise up in organizations, especially if you grew up in a particular discipline, your confirmation bias narrows because you're now conditioned to see the world through a certain lens. So if you grew up in finance, you see the world economically. If you grow up in marketing, you see the world through consumers. If you grow up in operations, you see the world through cost. And as you get higher in an organization, organizations by their nature naturally fragment. They pull apart. They create silos. They create pieces. And at the top of an organization or in broad roles, what an organization is most desperate for is cohesion. Is how do you bring the seams of the organization together? So the second one we call breadth together. You're no longer wed to a particular view of the world, but you now understand that your job is to build capabilities. So in your world, innovation is often the result of the intersection of consumer insights, R&D, and marketing. People who sit in those functions think about the world through their own function. But to an executive, they're not particularly interested in the boundaries of those functions. They're interested in what happens at the seams of them when those 3 things combine together to create an innovative force that you can repeat. If you don't broaden your mind to see the seams more blurry, you're going to be wed to one of them, or you're going to keep them fragmented. The third was choice. So an organization's decision-making apparatus is often one of the most fascinating things to watch because it's where a lot of dysfunction shows up. Whether you have leaders who are overly consumed in data and get analysis paralysis and can't make a choice, or you have leaders who are highly cowboy-like or cowgirl-like, and the classic "I just trust my gut," or they're very consensus-driven and need to have everybody's approval before they'll make a decision. One of probably the most fascinating finding in our research, we isolated the dimension of power to understand what it was that leaders did with greater degrees of power and how do they handle it. And of course, we expected to discover that the class for immoral gain, for self-serving purposes, and that certainly, those tendencies were certainly in the data. But the far greater abuse of power was not for self-interest, but it was the abandonment of it. People putting power down, not using it at all, and in favor of popularity or winning people's love and admiration or going to be popular. And that's just as great an abuse of power as the people who do it for self-interest or immoral gain. We just don't see it that way. We call it, oh, they don't have a backbone, or they lack confidence, or they're not assertive, or they're humble, or we in very different ways and don't see its destructive outcome. So choice making and how you are willing to narrow the focus of the organization. Most importantly, you are comfortable saying no to even great ideas. And lastly, connection. So these were the folks that every company has them, right? The people everybody wants to be around, the bosses that everybody wants to work for, the people who whose presence, if you're in it, you will learn something, you'll be better for it. And interestingly enough, this set of leaders, when they prioritize their stakeholders, the people, the relationships in which they most spent their time, it wasn't based on the people they most needed something from. It was based on the people they could enhance, people whose development they could progress. And you just knew that if you were in their presence, they were smart, they were sharp, they were compelling, but you knew they cared about you. You knew that you mattered to them. So context, breadth, choice, connection. Any one of those, no easy thing to learn, but the executives that rose up and succeeded did all four well.
I mean, it's always tricky to find a diamond in the rough in advance where there's potential, but they might not be perfect with all of those four facets already. Are these all things that people can develop? Yeah, and how might you do that?
Such a great question, Nick. That was the only relief I had in the research and was willing to write it, was because they're learnable. This is not some magical DNA that you're born with. The trick is they're all learnable. They're all learnable, but you need to start learning them early in your career, right? So you can start learning context by reading, by talking about strategy, by asking for your company's strategic plan and understanding who their competitors are and why you think you can win and why your customers choose you. Start thinking about the context of your own organization. Start walking across other departments. There is somewhere in another department, somewhere in your organization, someone relies on your work, or you rely on their work. Do you know what they do? Go across borders and just roam around and go meet people who have to live with the outcomes of your work. Find out what you do that irritates them. Find out where there's a breach. Find out what, if it's sales, it's marketing, because there's always a border war there. Or if it's operations, it's probably R&D. Go to the classic border wars from where you sit and figure out how to build a bridge, build a relationship, figure things and watch how your company makes decisions. Think about how you make choices. If you were faced with complex, difficult data sets for which there was no obvious answer, how would you choose? And build your network, build relationships, find ways you can commit to other people, find out whose success you can advance. One guy in our research had, he's now at the top of an organization and one of those beloved leaders, but he asked everybody he worked with the same three questions. He said, how can I be a better colleague to you? What are you working on today that's really important to you? And how can I help you with that really important thing? He asked those same questions to everybody, and everybody knew he meant it. And he always followed through and contributed. And that built him this amazing reputation. So when he became, one of the number 2 executive in the company, and probably at some point to be number 1, people just can't get enough of him. He's such a phenomenal leader and he cares so deeply. He's not perfect, but people understand that if you're in his presence, you're likely to be better for it. So there are absolutely things everybody should, and I wish organizations would start much sooner. The most bizarre thing we found was when we studied the 100 leaders in Mid-Ascent, 68% of them told us they were not prepared for the job they were given. And they got no follow-up coaching once they got the job. So to your point before, Nick, we have this mindset that says when we elevate people, it's because they're ready. Or that by conferring on you a higher level or a higher role in a hierarchy, we're somehow conferring on you competence to do the job. And nothing is further from the truth. Most of those people are ill prepared for the challenges they face, the political currents they have. Most of them can't let go of the work they were doing because that was what they were good at. So they bring that work with them and then become micromanagers and won't let go of it because they don't want to learn the requirements of a new job. And you have this compression now in the organization. And
it's interesting you touch on that topic of people sometimes struggling to let go of the work that they were doing. Because I read a very interesting article on LinkedIn today, which it was a thought piece. Usually I prefer articles that have a bit more research behind it, but this one seemed very prescient to me, and it basically made the argument that we shouldn't necessarily assume that only getting into leadership positions means that you're on the right job trajectory and doing a good job, because not necessarily everyone wants to be a manager or wants to sort of get into a leadership position. Yet sometimes we're given the impression, especially in today's corporate promotion style job market, that if you're not being promoted into some sort of leadership position, that means that you're not really an asset to the company.
Well, I think it's stunning to me that still in almost 2020 now, we're still thinking about career paths as upward pathways, right? We've had plenty of research to talk about lateral pathways and technical career tracks where you can excel as many R&D scientists or many salespeople. I mean, people with very deep technical expertise in a particular discipline don't want to lead other people, and they shouldn't. But we're not paying for those career paths. We're not actually valuing that expertise. And some companies are doing a great job. There are some companies out there who have become very innovative in how they reward and create career pathways and create different levels of technical expertise and allow advancement to happen outside the leadership of other people. But it's still pretty rare and so people leave. They feel like they have to port their technical expertise to another company or to another field in order to continue to develop and learn and grow, but still not wanting to take on the responsibilities of leading other people. And it's a shame because you lose a ton of talent that way, right? I think in highly ecosystemed networked organizations and networked industries now, hierarchy is of little help to us anymore in getting things done. We're almost all horizontal organizations that need to move things, information and products and ideas and information horizontally. And so being able to lead laterally is far more important a skill than being able to lead vertically.
I totally agree. Now, before we started, when we were having a chat, you mentioned this 10-year longitudinal study that you did to define what are the attributes of a good leader. You also mentioned that you had a follow-up study that went even longer. It was a 15-year study. What did that tell you?
Well, so we went back to the data set. We wanted to understand what is there systemically about these organizations. So at that point, 5 years later, we had 3,300 interviews. And so we decided we're using some very sophisticated AI tools to help read the data and quantify it and give us patterns and predictable variables. We did not impose variables on the data. We wanted to let the AI tell us. And what was fascinating quickly is that we began to correlate certain conditions in an organization and truth-telling. In other words, under what conditions would people lie or withhold the truth? And it was an astounding to us time. At least I know the ethical community, for example, has sort of been pointing at culture. I've known intuitively, it's not just about individual bad actors. 5,000 people didn't wake up one morning at Wells Fargo and go, hey, here's an idea. So what systemic toxins create these conditions under which otherwise really honest people will do dishonest things? And there also were, we chose to focus on the most prevalent ones. One of them was strategic clarity. So if you don't know if you are not who you say you are, if you say one thing, we all have mission, vision, values, brand statements. If you have statements of identity that are either not aligned to your actions, or they're diffuse and confusing. If you say we're going to compete one way, but you do it another, if there's a lack of strategic clarity, you are 3 times more likely to have people lie or withhold the truth. Because when we don't know who we are, we make things up. And you institutionalize duplicity. Because we all know we're not what that mission or value says, but we're not going to talk about it. So we're going to pretend to be that, even though we're not. And then people's own sense of purpose becomes completely diluted. Governance. If there's not transparency in the way you make decisions, if people have to rely on gossip, information scraps to make choices, and it's not clear who owns what decision rights in your organization, you're 3.5 times more likely to have people lie or withhold the truth. Accountability. If the way in which you measure contribution, not reward it, but measure it, in other words, how people's contributions are assessed, in their eye is seen as unfair, meaning it's not accurate, it's distorted, you don't know who I am, you are 4 times more likely to have people lie or withhold the truth, because when I feel something is unfair or unjust, I feel entitled to take. And lastly, border wars. So earlier we talked about the seams. If you have unresolved conflicts or misaligned metrics or factors that force people at seams that have to collaborate to actually compete or be at odds with each other, marketing and sales, division A versus division B, if there's unresolved conflict there, you are 6 times more likely to have people lie or withhold the truth, because now we have dueling truths. And if it's my truth versus your truth, I'm going to win, you're going to lose. And the statistical models were cumulative. In your organization, you are 16 times more likely to end up on the story of on the cover of the London Times or the Wall Street Journal that you never dreamed you'd be in.
So coming back to the question of what leaders and leadership can do, it sounds like a lot of those factors are at an organizational level, things that have maybe fallen apart a bit, things like not having clear communication or good governance. What can leaders individually do, both within their own teams and within the company overall, to try and rectify or remedy some of those factors if they see them?
Fabulous question, Nick. And there are very practical things leaders can do. I'm actually working on a book proposal now for a book called To Be Honest, to answer that very question. Certainly, you can make sure that anybody you're leading has clear line of sight to how their work matches the mission of the organization. Whether anybody else is role modeling or not, you can ask your team, are we embodying this mission? Do we live these values? That objective that the company set to be, to grow by X, how are we contributing to that? And make sure everybody has a clear connection to the broader work of the organization. And if they don't know, translate for them. Say, here's how I see the value you create and how it fits into the bigger story. Everybody wants to know how they fit into the bigger story. Make your decision-making transparent. Tell people on what basis you make choices, why you say no to things, what factors you're weighing. Include people. If broaden your own governance in your own team or your own department by allowing others to participate in the decisions that actually affect them. Make sure you're giving regular feedback to people so they know how they're being measured. Make sure you've had ongoing conversations about your expectations of them, how you see their contributions going, and when they're falling short, tell them. At the essence of accountability is an intimate, trust-based relationship between a leader and a follower. Your performance management systems, how you document performance, all that other stuff is just fruit of the poisonous tree if there's no great accountability system. And lastly, think about the broader set of people around you, outside your department, who rely on you. If there are border wars, if there is conflict with other departments, if you know that you have a nemesis, or that there's others who are frustrated with you. Classic case, I was working with an online technology company that was a travel platform, and I was working in the digital marketing folks, and you had SEO folks who were measured on, aggressively measured on click-throughs. You had product managers, digital product managers, who were measured on conversion. Well, they needed each other, to be effective in their work. The reality is those metrics put them at odds. Right? So if you know that there are things that create those disconnects, bring people together and fix it, right? Create the conditions under which you can have cohesion, not wars. So any leader can look at those 4 factors, and even if the broader organization is not modeling it, or there's major disconnects there, within your own control, you can have great impact. And here's a great litmus test. If at least once or twice a week, somebody you lead is not coming into your office and telling you something that's uncomfortable to hear, you suck. Just know your leadership is ineffective. Because rest assured, the odds are that at least twice a week you're doing something that somebody doesn't like or that somebody's frustrated by, that you screwed it up. And if no one's telling you, rest assured they're telling somebody. They're going home to, you are the conversation at dinner at night in the homes of the people you lead. If you don't know what stories they're telling about you, you should worry.
Yeah, that reminds me of a guest I had on a couple of months ago, Professor Amy Edmondson from Harvard, who talked about psychological safety and how the best organizations are the ones where actually people do talk about things going wrong and just being very open and trusting about it. And those are the companies that are able to, rather than hide from those issues, actually be open about them and get past them to fix them.
Well, and those are the companies, I mean, to the, the value of your audience, right? That's where innovation is really going to happen, right? We've all seen the painful realities of companies who are pretending to innovate. They pretend to have R&D. They pretend to have product development. They know the products are a dog. They know that things shouldn't be in that pipeline, but no one wants to say that, right? So they're not going to learn from failure. They're not going to listen to the analytics of their market. One company I work with, they had committed from an innovation point of view to have 40% of the following year's revenues come from new product launches. Which
in a year, that's very impressive.
Well, it was also delusional, right?
Yes, exactly.
Given that their track record was horrible, they had plenty of things in the pipeline that were all crap. Well, the guy that was head of innovation brought together the consumer insights folks and the marketing folks, the brand folks, and the manufacturing folks who had to build these products to market. To find out that among them, like you had people doing basis tests and consumer insights that were lying about the data because they were afraid to tell the truth about the bad results the tests were getting. You had brand people who were managing dogs of brands, and you had manufacturing people whose footprint was out of date and could not manufacture and build and launch small batch product launches to test products. They were all measured on different things. Very few of them understood how they fit together. And so the head of innovation, said, we're going to fix this. And we locked them in a room for like 5 days and made them work assiduously to realign themselves to figure out how are they going to become an innovation community? How are they going to fix those issues? And a year and a half later, they did launch, 28% of the revenue of it in one given year came from 2 or 3 great product launches, which were unprecedented for them. Because they did the work, right? It wasn't about creativity only. It was about aligning the organization and building the mechanisms you needed and being honest about what it would require to actually innovate. But so many organizations are not willing to do the work. And to Amy's, good work, they're not safe enough to have those conversations. So all that crap goes underground.
Ron, it's been wonderful speaking with you. I think we could probably keep talking for hours on the subject, but if people want to find out more about your thoughts on building leadership, I know you've written a couple of books, but what's the best place that people can go to find out more about you and your work?
Yeah. If you come to our website, Navalent, Navalent.com, we've got lots of great resources for you there. We have a free ebook on leading transformation. So if you're facing some dramatic change, you can come download our playbook on how we lead transformational endeavors at Navalent.com/transformation. We've got blogs, we've got videos, we've got all kinds of white papers and tools for you to download. So come hang out with us at Navalent.com and continue the conversation. You can also find me on Twitter at Ron Carucci and also on LinkedIn. So we'd love to keep the conversation going.
Perfect. I'll make sure to link to all of those down in the description below. And Ron, it's been wonderful having you here, and I look forward to speaking again with you soon.
Nicholas, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate your good work.
Thank you so much for listening. If you liked it, please like, share, and subscribe, and leave me a comment about what you thought and what you'd like to see more about. If you want to take your creativity and innovation capabilities to the next level, then invest in yourself with the premium training only available at ideatovalue.com. These exclusive training modules have all been put together by me, Nick Skillicorn, and have been used by thousands of artists, innovation leaders, and CEOs to become better at understanding the source of their creativity and executing on their innovation ambitions. And there is no risk to you, as they are backed by our money-back guarantee. Now, don't forget to go out there and make your ideas a reality. See you again soon.